So, let's talk about Ghana's housing market, because something really strange is happening there. You've got this huge desire for green, sustainable buildings, but for some reason, they're just not getting built. So what's the deal?
And this quote from some new research, it just hits the nail on the head. It's not about developers not wanting to build green. They absolutely do. The problem is they don't know how. It's like they know exactly where they want to go, sustainability, but they've been handed a car with no GPS and no map.
Okay, so this is where we have to get really clear on two words: awareness and literacy. They sound similar, but they're worlds apart. Awareness, that's knowing that you should eat healthy. Literacy, that's knowing how to actually cook a healthy meal. And in Ghana's building industry, you've got tons of awareness, but very, very little literacy. A huge gap.
So let's dive into our first section, the green building paradox. We're going to look at what this gap between knowing about green building and actually doing it looks like in the real world. And wow, this chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? When you survey developers, their scores on conceptual awareness, understanding the idea of sustainability, are through the roof. But then you look at operational literacy, the actual hands-on skills needed to build green, and the scores just plummet. And we're not talking about a tiny little dip here. This is a massive systemic divide. This quote really gets to the consequence of all this. Good intentions just don't matter if you don't have the skills. Think about it. A developer might totally agree that buildings need to be energy efficient. But if they can't actually do the math on which materials to use or how to design the building envelope, what are they going to do? They're going to fall back on what they know. And they end up building the exact same inefficient building they wanted to avoid in the first place. All right, section 2, let's get specific. The research pinpoints 3 major areas where this literacy gap is really showing up. So, where are things going wrong? Well, first, developers are totally fixated on the initial price tag, and they completely ignore what's called whole life cost. Second, when it comes to materials assessment, they're just using what they've always used. It's all habit and gut feeling, no data. And finally, there's no real performance measurement. So even if someone claims their building is green, there's no way to actually prove it. Let's zoom in on that first one. Whole life costing. What does that even mean? Well, it's not just the cost to put the building up. It's the cost of everything over its entire lifespan. We're talking energy bills, maintenance, repairs, the whole shebang. It's the real cost of ownership.
The iceberg analogy is perfect here. That upfront construction cost, that's just the tiny tip you see. The real cost, the massive chunk of ice underwater, is all those future expenses. So a building with fantastic insulation might cost a bit more today, but it could save the owner an absolute fortune on AC for the next 30 years. The problem is, without whole life costing, that huge, long-term savings is totally invisible when the decision is being made. Okay, so it's easy to point fingers at the developers here, but the research is super clear. This is not about them being lazy or not caring. This is a system-wide problem. So let's look at why this knowledge gap is so persistent.
It really comes down to 3 things that all feed into each other. It starts way back in education, where these practical green skills just aren't being taught. Then, once they're in the professional world, there's no real reason or reward for them to go back and learn this stuff. And finally, the regulatory environment is completely neutral. It doesn't require green building, and it doesn't penalize you for not doing it. It's a perfect storm.
And this quote just says it all, right? The problem isn't the individual developer. It's the entire system, educational, professional, regulatory, that has never once forced them to learn what sustainability actually takes. I mean, think about it from their perspective. If your customers aren't asking for it and the government doesn't require it, why on earth would you spend the time and money to learn?
So, if the problem is baked into the system, that means the solution has to be too. And the good news is, the research lays out a really clear 3-step plan to fix this.
Here's the roadmap. Step 1. In the short term, you make sustainability training a mandatory part of professional development. You have to learn this stuff to keep your license. Step 2, medium term. You start baking sustainability requirements right into the planning approval process. You can't get your permit without it. And then step 3, the long game. You establish a national green building certification for Ghana, something that actually measures and verifies performance. It's a smart plan that builds the knowledge first and then creates the market demand for it.
All right, our final section. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the strongest argument for fixing all this isn't just about saving the planet, it's about money, hard numbers. We're talking asset value and serious financial risk.
Just look at the difference.
On one side, you have a building from a developer who gets it. It has lower operating costs, you can prove its performance, and guess what? It's worth more. On the other side, you have a building from an unprepared developer. It's got higher energy bills, higher maintenance, and it's at risk of becoming a useless asset as soon as regulations tighten up. The bottom line is, this literacy stuff translates directly into dollars and cents.
So here's the big takeaway. Being literate in sustainability is no longer some optional feel-good extra. It is quickly becoming a competitive necessity. The ability to actually model, assess, and prove your building's performance is going to be what separates the winners from the losers. And for developers who don't have these skills, that's a huge financial risk looming on the horizon.
Which leaves us with one final big question. As sustainability becomes a core measure of a building's value, what is the real cost of just not knowing? Because there is a cost. You see it in higher bills, lower property values, and huge missed opportunities. So really the question isn't, can Ghana afford to invest in this knowledge? It's, can it possibly afford not to?